4.4 Part 4 talks about changing the amplitude and the period of the sine and cosine functions. So remember, we said amplitude is the absolute value of A, and for sine and cosine, we said their period was 2 pi, correct? But that's when our B value is 1. That's of our parent function. So when we have transformations going on, our period is really 2 pi over B. In our parent functions, B was 1, so that was no big deal. So remember, we said the amplitude is how far above or below the middle of the graph, correct? Period is how long it takes for the graph to repeat itself. So you can see here in both of these graphs that they give us that the period is, well, they just put the 2 pi over B there, because if I kept going on this first one, it would look just like what they graphed, wouldn't it? And the same thing on the cosine one there. If I kept going, it should look just like what they graphed, because they graphed a full cycle and we're just repeating it. All right, so in 1 here, it tells us our range is still going to be that negative A to positive A. One cycle is going to go from 0 to 2 pi over B, as long as it hasn't been shifted to the left or right, okay? And then it gives us a way here to get the x-coordinates. Guys, we're going to do the same thing that when we do our x-coordinates that I just showed you, okay? We're going to do from, unless there's a transformation, well, even if there's a transformation, I'm going to show you how to adjust your x values, but we're still going to do what's our first one, what's our last one, split it in half, and split our intervals in half. All right, and then it says there, if A is less than 0, then remember it's just a reflection across the x-axis. All right, so we're going to graph y equals 3 cosine of 1/2 x over a 1 period interval. So we need to remember, what's the parent function? Cosine of x. So I'm going to jot down my parent function, or parent table first, because I need it to help me. So it's going to go from 0 to what? 2 pi. Split it in half. Split that in half. Over time, you will get this memorized. Some of y'all may already have them down for today. Cosine starts where? Top or the middle? Top or the origin? Top. So it's going to start up at 1, and then it must, if it's at the top, it must come down and then go back up. No, there's 2 ways to do the next part. Oops. One thing we can do on this next one, the y equal, whoops, let me move that down just a little bit here. So y equals 3 cosine of 1/2 x. We can do this. This one isn't too bad. So you could do it the way we did before. What would we do to our y's? Multiply by 3. And what would we do to our x's? Yeah, it says times 1/2, but x always does the opposite. So we wouldn't multiply by 1/2. We'd really divide by it, which is the same as multiplying by 2. Okay, it's the same as multiplying by 2. So we could do that. But let me show you another way on it. Let's find our period. And you know what? Now, let's go ahead and do it this way on this one. I'll show you when we get to a harder one the other way. All right, so take your x's and multiply by 2. So 0 times 2. Pi over 2 times 2. Well, if you need to, write it out just to make sure. Right? Because the 2's on top, isn't it? So it's just really pi. And then we got pi times 2. Remember, though, I said it's a pattern?
Wait, wouldn't it be, how would that be half? I mean, how would that be pi?
How would that be pi? Look at what I wrote below the first one in red there.
Oh.
Okay. And then we have 3 pi over 2 times 2. That would be 3 pi. Do you see your pattern? We have 0, 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi. What's our last one? 4 pi. Okay, so if you're going to use a pattern, my personal rule, even for myself, is I work out the first 3, and then I can use my pattern from there. The first one is going to give me my pattern. From 0 to pi, I'm increasing by pi, right? The third point I put on there tells me, yeah, you're right. Because if it increased by pi again, then I didn't make a mistake. All right, guys. Make sure you get 4.3 done. I'll extend 4.4, but you're going to have videos next week to have to watch, okay?
How long are you extending 4.4?
It'll go to probably the next weekend.